How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. I am delighted to have you with me. The phone number, 877-973-7425, should you wish to be on the program. If you will, please text ARMY, A-R-M-Y, to 33777 and sign up for our activist list as we head to your states. Doing live broadcasts. We've done some now. We've been to Florida. We've been to Oklahoma. We've been to Las Vegas. We'll be doing more. We'd love to let you know when we're coming. But more importantly, as we're trying to mobilize people to support, for example, Donald Trump's cabinet picks and others, we have options for you to be able to call your member of the Senate or the House and say, vote for this, vote for that, or don't vote for this, don't vote for that. So if you would, please do that. By the way, Pete Hegseth has filed an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal today. The headline, it dropped just a short time ago, is, quote, the title, "I faced fire before, I won't back down. I look forward to an honest confirmation hearing, not a press show trial based on anonymous accusations." Good for him for standing for himself. Now, today in the United States Supreme Court is the Scrimity case. Scrimity is actually about a Tennessee law that prohibits the use of drugs or surgeries on minors for gender transitions. I need you to understand up front, there's no middle ground on this issue. And I don't say that lightly because I always try to find the middle ground, but there's not. Either a boy can become a girl or not. There's no in between. Now, there used to be when people would cross-dress or whatnot, and people just kind of gave them a funny look and moved on about their business. But now they're loud, proud, in your face, and they've got their pastel stripes on the pride flag. There's no more middle ground. You either must affirm their lies, and they are lies, or not. This all relates to Marxist thought, where, remember, here is your key and important bottom line. In Marxism, the idea is that words themselves control reality. So if you look and say the sky is blue, and everyone else says the sky is green, you're going to start calling the sky green because you don't want to be the outsider. You don't want to be the weirdo. What the trans movement does is they've embraced this Marxist ideology where everyone must be shouted down who says that that's a boy. You must be silenced. Chase Strangio is an attorney for the American Civil Liberties Union and argued before the U.S. Supreme Court today. Chase Strangio is a girl, is a woman. Chase Strangio lacks a penis and lacks an Adam's apple. But Chase Strangio has taken a lot of testosterone enough to start growing facial hair and has a mustache. Chase Strangio, a number of years ago, argued that there's no such thing as a male body, and yet has gone out of her way to present herself as a man to the world and insists that she is a he. And in fact, Chase Strangio, despite working for the American Civil Liberties Union, which in the past was defined by its robust defense of the First Amendment, has claimed that books like Abigail Schreier's book on transgenderism that questions transgenderism should be banned. The trans movement depends on censorship. The trans movement is a tyranny. You must be made silent. I have literally lost an advertiser to this program for daring to question the trans movement. They come after you in every way, shape, and form they can because they want to turn a lie into truth. And the only way they can turn a lie into truth is if the truth tellers are silenced. If everyone just stands up and says, no, boys can't become girls, the trans movement dies. But they got a bunch of neurotic, wealthy white people who are willing to lie for them. Yesterday on CNN, previewing the Scrimeti case today before the United States Supreme Court, Chase Strangio was on with Jake Tapper. I want to play you this. And the brilliance of this on radio is you're going to hear this. You're not going to be able to see Chase Strangio, but I encourage you, if you text the word data to 33777 and get my show notes, you don't even have to get the paid version. I put it in the free piece I sent out this morning. I put the video. You can see Chase Strangio. Chase Strangio has gone through an elaborate cosmetic deception to appear like a man, but she's not. And when you don't have the benefit of the video and all you have is the voice, you could hear that girl with mental issues who believes that the way to win is to silence dissent. This is Jake Tapper with Chase Strangio.
I want to bring in the lawyer who's going to argue this high-profile case before the U.S. Supreme Court, Chase Strangio. Chase, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it. So the case comes at a time when 26 states have passed laws restricting healthcare treatments for transgender youth, according to a CNN analysis of data from the nonprofit think tank Movement Advancement Project. So how do you plan to argue before the U.S. Supreme Court in a case that could have wide-ranging implications beyond the state of Tennessee?
Well, thank you for having me, Jake. And obviously, this is a critical inflection point for transgender people across the country. We're coming off of an election season where transgender people played an outside role in people's consciousness in terms of the way in which we were situated as a threat to others. And when we look at the map of states that ban this type of evidence-based healthcare, we went from 0 states that had these bans in 2020 to now more than half the country. So before the court tomorrow, the question is really a simple one as I see it. It's really, this is a law that bans medical treatment only when it is prescribed inconsistent with an individual's sex. Our argument is that treats people differently because of their sex, and therefore the court has to treat it like all other forms of sex discrimination, and that's why it's unconstitutional.
So attorneys representing the state of Tennessee told the U.S. Supreme Court, quote, if the government's theory holds, men who identify as women could claim constitutionally based access to women's bathrooms, women's locker rooms, and women's sports. Accepting that theory would perversely erode women's rights and jeopardize landmark statutes protecting women's equal access to schools, winners' podiums, and beyond. What's your response to that?
Well, I obviously disagree with that premise that allowing transgender women into women's sports or women's bathroom is a threat to women, but it is also not the question before the court in this case. And in fact, it is a totally independent question about whether a law that bans medical care for transgender adolescents discriminates against people based on sex versus these separate cases that preceded any of these healthcare bans will continue to be litigated in the courts regardless of the outcome here. So that clearly is conflating a bunch of different questions. The question before the court tomorrow is about whether banning medical care, overriding the consent of parents, the recommendations of doctors is a violation of equal protection.
What do you say to physicians who are sensitive and supportive of trans kids, obviously don't want suicidal ideation, et cetera, but wonder if there is enough data as of now to prove that it is beneficial to allow these sort of treatments before the age of 18?
So I would say 3 things. And the first is we have decades of both clinical experience and research data showing that this is medical treatment that provides critical benefits to adolescents who need it. And so this is not new. This is not new medication. And so we have that information. We have long-term studies that track people for 5-6 years. The Supreme Court this week heard arguments in an FDA case in which the FDA referred to long-term as being 6 months of follow-up. Here we have years of follow-up. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is nobody has to provide this medication to adolescents. These are not doctors being forced to provide this medication. These are doctors who are wanting to treat their patients in the best way that they know how based on the best available evidence.
It goes on from there, in which Chase Strangio makes the claim that 2-year-olds know they're trans. Notice that Chase Strangio tries to claim that we have lots of studies and lots of evidence. It didn't go so well before the United States Supreme Court today. Samuel Alito seized on this with Elizabeth Prologer, who, by the way, you should note that for the very first time that I can recall ever in the Supreme Court, two justices of the Supreme Court, Alito and Thomas, both accused the Solicitor General of the United States of attempting to mislead the United States Supreme Court. This, my friends, is just brutal from Sam Alito.
A question about the state of medical evidence at the present time. In your petition, you made a sweeping statement, which I will quote. Overwhelming evidence establishes that the appropriate gender-affirming treatment with puberty blockers and hormones directly and substantially improves the physical, psychological well-being of transgender adolescents with gender dysphoria. That was in November 2023. Now, even before then, the Swedish National Board of Health and Welfare wrote the following. They currently assess, quote, that the risks of puberty blockers and gender-affirming treatment are likely to outweigh the expected benefits of these treatments, which is directly contrary to the sweeping statement in your petition. After the filing of your petition, of course, we saw the release of the Cass report in the United Kingdom, which found a complete lack of high-quality evidence showing that the benefits of the treatments in question here outweigh the risks. And so I wonder if you would like to stand by the statement that you made in your petition, or if you think it would now be appropriate to modify that and withdraw the statement that there is overwhelming evidence establishing that these treatments have benefits that greatly outweigh the risks and the dangers.
I, of course, acknowledge, Justice Alito, that there is a lot of debate happening here and abroad about the proper model of delivery of this care and exactly when adolescents should receive it and how to identify the adolescents for whom it would be helpful. But I stand by that there is.
Yeah, she tries to stand by claims that Alito has already disproven. In fact, he did this with I believe, Strangio as well on the Cass report from Great Britain.
True in every respect, but on page 195 of the Cass report it says, there is no evidence that gender affirmative treatments reduce suicide.
What I think that is referring to is there is no evidence in the studies that this treatment reduces completed suicide. And the reason for that is completed suicide, thankfully and admittedly, is rare, and we're talking about a very small population of individuals with studies that don't necessarily have completed suicides within them. However, there are multiple studies, long-term longitudinal studies that do show that there is a reduction in suicidality, which I think is a positive outcome to this treatment.
Let me ask a question about another issue that came up during Justice Kagan's questioning and Justice Barrett's.
So, in other words, the Cass report shows that there's not a reduction in suicides between those on transition drugs and those who aren't. And Chase Strangio says, well, suicidal thoughts. There's a reduction in suicidal thoughts. There's no difference in suicides. Just suicidal thoughts is allegedly the argument. And Strangio also got tripped up by Alito on the question of gender immutability. Listen to this.
Does the category of does transgender status apply to individuals who are gender fluid?
I think that the distinguishing characteristic is to have a birth sex that does not align with, or a gender that does not align with one's birth sex. So it may include people who have different understandings of their gender identity, but I think it is still the distinguishing characteristic of a birth sex and a gender identity that are incongruent.
Are there individuals who are born male, assigned male at birth, who at one point identify as female, but then later come to identify as male, and likewise for individuals who are assigned female at birth, at some point identify as female, identify as male, but later come to identify as female? Are there not such people?
There are such people. I agree with that, Justice.
So it's not an immutable characteristic, is it?
Well, I think people's understanding of it shifts, but the evidence shows that there is at least a strong underlying basis. And I think the normative reason for that particular consideration is whether or not this is something that someone should or could change, and whether they should have to change it in order to receive constitutional protections. And I think transgender status squarely fits within that.
He just eviscerated the argument right then and there. Alito eviscerates the argument. It's not immutable. Therefore, remember, this is an equal protection argument that's being made. It's an equal protection argument. And the argument has been that trans status is immutable, meaning it's unchanged. And therefore, since it's unchanged, the law has to apply equally on both sides. And by saying it is mutable, it is changeable, that takes it outside the realm of equal protection. It automatically destroys the legal argument being made by the trans movement by admitting against interest that trans status is not immutable, but male and female are.
Hey, it's Emma Chamberlain. I designed these new glasses for Warby Parker, and I basically can't take them off. Like, I'm showering in them and sleeping in them. They're just that good. Go see them all at warbyparker.com. And you know what? Have a good day too. Okay? All right? Bye.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry. Everybody's talking about it. Billions of dollars invested, so buckle up. The problem is AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, Databricks, Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/Erickson, ERICKSON. That's oracle.com/Erickson. Oracle.com/Erickson. Go check them out today. Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. I got to read you a tweet from Ed Whelan, who works for the Ethics Public Policy Center. Great guy, great conservative. Ed was in contact with a lawyer who's been involved in this case, and he points out that this lawyer, Ed Whelan, points out Justice Amy Coney Barrett had probably asked the most important question in the entirety of oral argument. Unfortunately, I couldn't get in and grab the audio, but let me tell you, basically it was, if there were a new drug that transitioned kids, regardless of the sex, and a state banned it, would heightened scrutiny apply? That is, there are levels of scrutiny of what's constitutional and not. And the Solicitor General said no. If there was a new drug that transitioned kids, regardless of sex, and a state banned it, would heightened scrutiny apply? And the Solicitor General said no. That should be the end of it. That means that the state is banning based on purpose and risks, not on sex. The Constitution of the law cannot turn merely on how it describes the treatment it's banning. There are 2 fatal flaws in the left's case. One is they're trying to make this an equal protection argument, that everybody, regardless of race or sex, must be treated equally before the law, and that this discriminates, except they showed to Justice Alito that transgenderism is not a mutability issue. The other is on medical purposes, and states already have the power to regulate medicines and not at heightened constitutional scrutiny levels. This fatally is flaw in the argument for the trans community. Now, you guys are maybe worried about the economy in your banks, with banks collapsing out there and the economy out there. Swiss America has been the trusted leader in precious metals for 40 years. They've been warning people about a secret war on cash for some time. If you're interested in safeguarding your hard-earned cash from the secret war, you need their report. It is completely free. Swiss America is rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. They can educate you on protecting your assets in their report, The Secret War on Cash. It takes less than 15 minutes to read. It can save your retirement and finances. It is completely free. To get a completely free copy of this report, all you need to do is call or text my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 800-289-2646. If you text 800-289-2646, all you got to do in the message field is put in Eric, E-R-I-C-K. They'll send you a link. You can get the report. The all-out war on cash includes digital forms of currency, and it's growing. So get this report, the Secret War on Cash, completely free. Just call or text my name, Eric, to 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. Message and data rates may apply. Greetings. It is Eric Erickson here. I'll get to your phone calls here in just a moment. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, where there appears to be some larger movement happening now to push Pete Hegseth out. Hegseth, however, says that his mom's been making calls on his behalf, which is kind of funny. His mom's making calls on his behalf, and that he's going nowhere. But there seems to be a big push to get him to step aside. I don't know whether it's going to happen or not. We'll see. Now, one thing I got to say is I do have clips from Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson. There's something you need to understand here. I think it was very notable today that Neil Gorsuch was uncharacteristically silent on the United States Supreme Court. Neil Gorsuch caused part of the problem. I think Gorsuch is a fine addition to the United States Supreme Court and a very good justice, but Neil Gorsuch caused part of the problem, and that is his Bostock opinion, which claims that transgenderism is part of equal protection. He made a very nuanced argument about equal protection laws, not the equal protection clause of the Constitution, to rope transgenderism into it, and he sided with the left on the court on that decision. And we are now where we are as a country in large part because Neil Gorsuch overstepped his bounds. And I wonder if his silence today was realizing he caused this fight. He was uncharacteristically silent. And I wouldn't be surprised if Neil Gorsuch sides with the left, given his Bostock opinion. I wouldn't be surprised. And I wonder if that will be heralded as a great success from those who support Donald Trump, because he was a Trump pick, and he's a very good pick on the court, but I think he's wrong on this issue. Also, Elena Kagan continues to be an intellectual heavyweight. She actually asked deeply probative questions of both sides. She clearly is sympathetic to the trans argument, but she asked deeply probative questions. The only two people on the court today who just beclowned themselves were Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor. You don't believe me? This is Ketanji Brown Jackson
being drawn by the statute. That was sort of like the starting point. The question was whether it was discriminatory because it applied to both races and it wasn't, necessarily invidious or whatever. But, as I read the statute here, the case here, the court starts off by saying that Virginia is now one of 16 states which prohibit and punish marriages on the basis of racial classifications. And when you look at the structure of that law, it looks in terms of, you can't do something that is inconsistent with your own characteristics. It's sort of the same thing. So it's interesting to me that we now have this different argument, and I wonder whether Virginia could have gotten away with what they did here by just making a classification argument the way that Tennessee is in this case.
Yes, I think that's exactly right, that there is absolutely a parallel between any law that says you can't act inconsistent with a protected characteristic and in all other contexts.
You got that? That's Ketanji Brown Jackson claiming that this issue of whether or not children can be prohibited by the state from taking transition drugs that will permanently sterilize them is the same as interracial marriage. That's Ketanji Brown Jackson's argument, that this is the states that are prohibiting transition drugs from minors are akin to states that prohibited interracial marriage. That was her argument, among other very dumb arguments she made. And then there's this from Sonia Sotomayor on the Supreme Court.
cannot eliminate the risk of detransitioners. So it becomes a pure exercise of weighing.
Let me pause this real quick. That's Matthew Rice. He's the attorney for Tennessee in conversation with Sonia Sotomayor.
Benefits versus risk. And the question of how many minors have to have their bodies irreparably harmed for unproven benefits is one that is best left.
I'm sorry, counselor. Every medical treatment has a risk. Even taking aspirin. There's always going to be a percentage of the population under any medical treatment that's going to suffer a harm. So the question in my mind is not, do policymakers decide whether one person's life is more valuable than the millions of others who get relief from this treatment? The question is, can you stop one sex from the other?
You have that, her argument is that even taking aspirin is risky. She's comparing sterilization of children to taking aspirin. That's not a sharp argument. Here's essentially the argument. The state has a vested interest in protecting children. The response is that, but if parents and doctors say this is in the best interest of the children, shouldn't we go with the parents and the doctors? The response to that from those who support Tennessee is that there was a time in this country where doctors and parents were giving children lobotomies. And the state intervened and said, you can't do that. And the Supreme Court said the state is right to protect the future health of children. A lobotomy is a permanent medical decision. And we know from the science, admitted, by the way, by the trans activists in court today, we know that these transition drugs permanently affect bodies. If you give a boy estrogen, you're going to cause the boy to go sterile. If you give a girl high doses of testosterone, you're going to cause the girl to go sterile. If you give a boy testosterone, it helps with the development of the boy as a boy. If you give a girl estrogen, it helps with the development of the girl as a girl. So you give the boy estrogen, you cause the boy to transition to being more like a girl. You give a girl testosterone, you cause the girl to transition to be more like a boy. They are completely opposite things. These are not equal protection issues. These are about the deployment of medical technology to children. And the Supreme Court has long said that if a state intervenes to prohibit medicine or medical devices or surgery from being applied to children, even as parents and doctors want it to happen, the state is in the right because the democratically elected institutions of government are more likely to rationally be able to decide what is good or not in a debate. And that was the opening argument of Chief Justice John Roberts today. That why should the United States Supreme Court intervene in a developing medical situation where there are disputes, but the growing shift of evidence and weight of evidence is towards those who say these drugs permanently alter children? We know there are cases downplayed by the left. We know there are plenty of cases where kids transition and then decide, you know what, actually, I really am a boy, and they detransition. Or really decide, you know what, I actually am a girl and detransition. You start applying permanence here, you could ruin someone's life. You could actually see an increase in suicide. In fact, the Cass report noted in Great Britain, there's no reduction in suicide. In other words, there are kids who transition, realize they've done something foolish and wrong, and it's now irreversible, and they kill themselves. By the way, there's no difference in suicide. This is one of the other arguments from the trans community they've made that isn't true. Their argument is that kids who transition have lower rates of suicide, except there are plenty of data to show that in areas of the country that are deeply affirming to transgenderism, there's as high a suicide rate as in areas where people aren't. Kids still commit suicide. It's a tragedy. But pumping them full of drugs isn't a good thing. Pumping them full of drugs even if the doctors say so. And by the way, in this country, unlike Great Britain, in this country, the American Academy of Pediatrics profits off of this. The American Academy of Pediatrics is not some neutral arbiter. The American Academy of Pediatrics actually has a role to play here, a profitable role. Same with Planned Parenthood. That's why a governmental review of the CAS report in Great Britain, remember the reaction to the CAS report was to try to shut it up. The reaction to the CAS report was try to silence CAS. She's now been given a baron position, a baroness Cass now for her service. She was maligned by the trans activists, and all she did was point out that their claims don't hold up to scrutiny. And when the United States Supreme Court justices trotted out the Cass report today, the trans activists before the court, including the Solicitor General of the United States, got deeply, deeply defensive. Why? Because they have a hard time rebutting what the Cass report found. To the phones, Michael's been waiting patiently. Welcome to the show, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing great, Eric. How are you?
Great.
So I wanted to make a comment about something that occurred to me when you played the clip of Chase Strangio.
Mm-hmm.
I was overwhelmed by the hypocrisy of all this, because in this particular case they are doing whatever they can to abide by parental consent for this particular thing that's going on. But on the other hand, they have no problem running roughshod over parental consent for things like getting an abortion at school and not telling the parents, or the questionable literature that's in the school libraries. And so it just struck me as like, well, this is really hypocritical, because they're so defensive of parental consent on one thing and then run over it for something else.
Isn't it funny how that works? It's so transactional for them. Heads, they win. Tails, you lose. And that is the largest part of their argument out there. And, yeah, it's such a good point, Michael, that, yes, they don't want parental consent for an abortion. But if a parent says, okay, here's the thing, though. This is the one that bothers me, what I wrote about this morning. If a parent leaves a bruise on a child because they've hit the child, that parent is arrested as an abuser. If a parent refuses to allow their child to chop off their breasts or their penis because the child believes they're in the wrong body, that parent is considered an abuser to the left. The hero is the parent who allows their child to be mutilated, according to the left. That is screwed up. That is upside down. The parent who mutilates their child is considered the hero to the left. The permanent mutilation of their child. The permanent sterilization of their child. That parent's considered the good parent, according to the left. The parent who says, no, I'm not going to go along with my child because my child has mental health issues, that parent's considered the bad guy. That parent is akin to the parent who smacked their kid and left a bruise. That is wildly screwed up. Up is down and down is up, and reality is a lie and lie is reality. And the Supreme Court conservatives today really exposed the lies and hypocrisy of the left. They went into court arguing that gender identity is immutable and had to admit to Justice Scalia it's not. They went in and said that gender transitioning can keep a kid from committing suicide and left it with actually there's no evidence for that. They were exposed. Good. Now I need to tell you about the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. That'll clean out the air in your house. If you've got stinky odors in your house, the Eden Pure Thunderstorm can wipe out those. It will. It generates ozone. Ozone is it's an oxygen molecule with the third atom, O3 instead of O2. And oxygen wants to give up that extra atom. What it does is particles, odor particles are ions. And when ozone hits it, it wipes each other out. And so the ozone becomes oxygen and the odor particle is gone. It's just poof, gone. And it really works. There's not an odor that can hold up to the ozone particles when the ozone touches those odor ions. But also, the new Eden Pure Thunderstorm also generates plasma. And when the air is pulled through the Eden Pure Thunderstorm, it hits the plasma charge, and bacteria and viruses are killed. 99.9% bacteria and viruses wiped out. It also gets rid of pet dander, pollen, and dust. And you can get 3 of them, and you can save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3, ERICK3. So if you go to EdenPureDeals.com, you'll be confronted with a discount code box, and you put in ERIC3, ERICK3, and it'll be added to your cart. You get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms. You save $200, and then you wipe out odors. You wipe out dust. You wipe out pollen. You wipe out bacteria and viruses. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, and I sure am delighted to have you with me today. What a wild day before the Supreme Court. We didn't even get into a lot of the other stuff that I wanted to talk about today, but I do want to play you this from Tim Burchett. He is a congressman, represents the Knoxville, Tennessee area. He is a volunteer. And he was on CNN talking about the spending problems we got out there.
It depends on the situation, but if we continue on this path, it's inevitable we're going to destroy our economy and shut the government down anyway. Right now Americans are paying around $600 to $1,200 more a month just to survive. And the reason we are doing that is because of our reckless spending. It's deficit spending. Every economist will tell you that is what causes the devaluation of your dollar, and we just can't continue on this path. All we're doing is really just buying our reelection, and both parties are guilty of it.
It's good for him to say both parties are guilty of it because both parties are guilty of it. Part of the issue here is the Republicans are going to have a very slim majority when they get back into Congress. One of the very notable aspects of this very slim majority is that the outgoing Senate majority leader, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, actually sang Mike Johnson's praises. Now, I realize y'all may not be McConnell fans, but it was notable that McConnell would sing Johnson's praises because Johnson is actually very much to the right of McConnell on a whole host of issues. And essentially what McConnell was doing as outgoing Republican leader was saying, we can do business with this guy in the House. There have been periods of time like Bob Dole and Newt Gingrich did not get along, that Johnson and McConnell could not see eye to eye on issues but still have a cooperative relationship. It's actually a good thing. Johnson's going to come in with a very narrow majority, and he's going to have Donald Trump's help cajoling Republicans to toe a party line. It's going to be very difficult for Johnson, even with Trump doing it, because you can have just a handful of moderates or a handful of conservatives say no, and it's going to sabotage the agenda. Like, for example, one of the big issues is SALT, state and local tax deduction. The New York congressmen who are Republicans are saying they will kill any tax reform package that does not restore the SALT deduction, where people get 100% discount on their state liabilities. It's killing New York. It's actually, the SALT deduction is actually a terrible deduction in the code because it allows states to drive up taxes on people without those people actually feeling the tax burden. But the New Yorkers are insisting it's got to happen. We're not going to be able to get tax reform without restoring the SALT deduction because of those Republicans in the House of Representatives with a very narrow margin. It's going to be interesting to see how this navigates. Now, I do have to give a shout out to Chuck Schumer here at the end. It used to be that you could only do one reconciliation package a year. So everything you want to do, you had to load up. Thanks to Chuck Schumer, he set a precedent that Republicans are about to use against him and the Democrats, that you can have one reconciliation package where you make spending cuts and then use that reconciliation package to actually spend in the second reconciliation package. And wow, that's going to completely undermine the Democrats. And like with the filibuster, it is a precedent that was set by the Democrats. Republicans are now going to use against them, and it's going to be hilarious to watch the meltdown, the shattering of norms all of a sudden. Talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.